The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be? Me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, shout out to everybody that joined me on Bleacher Report. I guess I was having some mic issues that I wasn't aware of. I am proud to announce that I am upgrading my mic this offseason. So that'll be one of the changes that you will see is that I'm finally retiring the OG and putting him up in the rafters. He's been a good soldier for the better part of about 5-6 years now, but his time has passed, and he's served his purpose. And this dude has been with me for a very long time, but it's time to upgrade. So you'll be seeing that change somewhere here in the near future. But I think that was a bad connection or something with Bleacher Report, because I don't think the mic is dying on me just yet. You know what I mean? So whatever the case may be, my goal was to just do the video. I'm glad I didn't simulcast it, because I was going to simulcast it on my YouTube channel. And I'm glad I didn't do that, because it would have been it would have been messing up, and I would have been not happy with the quality, and I probably would have taken the video down and had to do it over anyway. So I'm glad I just left it on Bleacher Report, and we'll get that situation, straightened out here in the near future. But in any event, I figured why not just go ahead and knock this video out, since I had already done the work for Bleacher Report. Might as well do it here on the channel, right? And I was just going to upload the video from Bleacher Report here, but since the audio was choppy, I'm just going to go ahead and run through this thing live with you guys real quick and get out of here. I'm not going to hold you too long. We'll be here as long as you want me to be here, right? So we've gone through this draft with a fine-tooth comb already multiple times, but we haven't given the draft itself a grade. We haven't given the individual picks a grade, and that's what we aim to do today. So I'm not going to be long-winded with this portion of the show, right? Getting into the introductory portion. We know what it is, right? We know what we've done. So let's take a look at what we've done. And I'll tell you this right now too. I took a look at some of the undrafted players they brought in, and it's a really good list. I saw Rosamie St. Jack on that list, and who's a receiver from Georgia, and I'm thinking he could make this football team. Like, he's got some talent, right? So I'm gonna dive into that, and eventually, I might make a video based off of the undrafted guys that they brought in here. And again, I don't like to make too much of the undrafted guys. They're undrafted for a reason. And, but where we are, I think it's more important to understand that where we are as a football team, undrafted guys have a much higher probability of cracking this roster than, say, Philadelphia's roster or the Chiefs roster or a more established, seasoned veteran roster that is trying to win now, where they don't have as many roster spots. We're turning the roster over. Nobody's safe except for the Terry McLaurins, the Jahan Dotsons, the Deron Paynes, and John. Those are the guys that are safe. Everybody else, you can have someone take your spot, right? So, I told you that the defensive backfield is where I think the most competition lies. And I looked at that list, and there are defensive backs littered all over that undrafted free agent list. So, anyway, like I said, we'll dig into that at some point, probably down the road this week. But I want to stick with the theme of this draft class and how impressive of a group it was. And obviously we start with the first pick that Washington made, number 2 overall. I thought there was much to do about nothing in regards to this pick during the process. This never felt like a pick that was for sale, that, anybody could get Washington to move off of, even though there was a conversation surrounding that throughout the process. Our GM, Adam Peters, put that to rest towards the end of the process. there was a civil war that took place, obviously, between Jayden Daniels stands and Drake May stands, and there seemed to be no middle ground that they could come to as to what Washington should do. Ultimately, the Commanders went with the guy that gave them not only the best chance to win right away, which is what I think ultimately, made the decision easier. He's the guy that's ready to play right now, but also the guy with the most electrifying and athletic profile in this draft. And you could argue that Daniels is even more so ready to play right now than that of Caleb Williams. I mean, he's established, he's played more college football, he's seen more, he's developed, I think, a little bit more so than Caleb Williams has. And the Heisman Trophy, both were Heisman Trophy winners, right? So the talent is clearly there for both of those individuals, but Daniels has played more football. He played in the tougher conference and put up the numbers in a conference where you just don't see those types of statistics, be posted. So I think when you kind of assess the situation, it was a no-brainer. Like, if you're talking about trying to win now versus winning in the future, I think Daniels offers you that. I'm still not sure if he has more upside than Drake May. I still think May's upside is greater, but he may never reach that upside, right? Drake May never get to what he can ultimately be. You're banking on something that right now you can't see. It's not tangible. It doesn't exist. You have to get him there. Jayden Daniels comes in ready to work, ready to play right now. And I don't think anybody feels like he's going to come in here and stink it up. At a bare minimum, he's going to be a very solid NFL starting caliber quarterback. And that's why we talk about floor versus ceiling. The bust factor with Jayden Daniels is, to me, the least of any of these quarterbacks. If you're talking about the big three in this draft class of Caleb Williams, got the highest floor of any of the quarterbacks. And so you're getting a guy that you just feel like is bust proof almost. And I hate to use that term because anybody can be a bust in this league. We talk about guys as if they're can't miss. There's no such thing as a can't miss prospect. Anything can happen. But in this particular draft, Jayden Daniels is as close as you're going to get to a bust proof quarterback. And with that said, we've been in the quarterback wilderness for over 3 decades. It's trending towards 4. I mean, we've gone through this exercise enough to where I don't have to do it again. But we haven't had a franchise quarterback since 1985 when Joe Theismann snapped his leg on a Monday night against the New York Giants. So there's no debating here that this guy is viewed as the guy that's going to pull us out of that rut, out of the abyss, if you will. It's a tremendous pick. It's the perfect pick if you're Adam Peters, Lance Newmark, Dan Quinn and company, to make it your first one to try to set the tone to turn this franchise around. Team captain, guy that's a tireless worker, football character off the charts, personal character off the charts, and performance on the field off the charts. And that is represented by the Heisman Trophy that he was able to win this year with 40 touchdown passes, only 4 interceptions, and another 10 on the ground. Tremendous season in the toughest conference that exists in college football. To me, it's a no-brainer. This is an A+ pick for the Washington Commanders. A+ pick, right? So you get to the second pick for Washington in the draft, and from most of you already know this, but I mocked Washington to take Jerzan Newton, in the second round of my mock draft. If you haven't had a chance to check out my mock draft, if you still are interested, it's up. The one with trades is the one that you want to watch. It's the more realistic one to me, even though I did make a sort of a pseudo crazy trade in there with New England. It's the more feasible draft because trades are going to happen. You don't have a draft in a vacuum without trades. So in my mind's eye, there's still a contingent of the fan base that still is kind of unsure as to why Washington would take a defensive tackle when we already had Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen and not go after tackle here. And I've explained this already, but I don't mind explaining it again because I need this to make sense to those who just don't seem to understand. There's a such thing as taking a strength and making it stronger. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. The good teams often do that. That's how the rich stay rich. There's never going to be a time where a team that has a strength says, you know what? I don't want to make my strength stronger. I think I'm fine where we are right now. Let's go over here and improve this part of the roster, even though the players at this particular point of the draft don't necessarily upgrade the roster as much as we would like. Whereas the position that we've already gotten a ton of talent at, if I add to it even more, that's going to add more value and increase the talent on the roster more so than just grabbing a guy at a position of need. In my mind, Johnny Newton is a first-round talent. And in a normal draft where 8 offensive tackles and 6 quarterbacks don't go in the first round, in a normal draft where that doesn't happen, where 6 quarterbacks don't go in the first 12 picks, where 8 tackles don't go in the first round, where the first 14 picks aren't all offensive players, in a normal NFL draft, Johnny Newton is a first-round pick. You know what I'm saying? Like, I talked about how spillage takes place. And I've talked about that for about the last 3 years in particular, spillage. This was the first time Washington has really benefited from spillage. Because you essentially sat in the second round. You allowed 8 tackles to come off the board. You saw 6 quarterbacks come off the board. You saw all of these football players pushed up, which meant some had to be pushed back. And it almost bit you in the ass because the Falcons came up and took a defensive tackle right in front of you. They jumped right in front of you. And I mean, I was nervous. I'm not going to front because you know how I feel. I always want the option. I just want the option to exist. And they came up and they came up for a defensive tackle. It just wasn't the one that we were looking to get. I felt like Scooby-Doo in that moment. I was like, oh no. And the Falcons said, don't worry. You don't have to be nervous. It's not, oh no. It's Ruka, row. You're good, bro. So I appreciate the Falcons once again for making sure that the plan that we were crafting came together. And so it was a no-brainer with Newton on the board. And let me take it a step further. After 8 tackles going in the first round, there were no tackles of value at that portion of the draft. It just wasn't. And I talked about that going into day 2, was that there are no tackles that you feel good about at 36 or 40. And so to me, there's no debating what Washington did here. This was the absolute right move. And when we get into the actual player in Johnny Newton, this is the guy that can play up and down the defensive line, and he did exactly that at Illinois. This is a guy that is extremely athletic for his size, guy with quickness off the snap, a guy with a bevy of moves, and a motor that runs hot and stays hot, a guy that can find the edge. And I think that's my favorite trait of his, is he finds the edge of the offensive lineman in front of him. And what do I mean by that? In order to turn the corner on an offensive lineman, you've got to get to their edge. You can't go through them. They're not transparent. You can't just run through a guy. I mean, you can run him over, right? But that rarely happens in the NFL, right? You've got to have the ability to seek out their edge, get to their shoulder, and then turn the corner on them. That's what I mean by getting to the edge, right? Getting to an edge. He gets to the edge of an offensive lineman as quick as any offensive lineman in this year's draft class. And so you couple that with the swim move and the rip move that he also deploys. the closing speed once he has an opportunity to get to the quarterback, his ability to play the run, be physical at the point of attack. He does everything. 7.5 sacks this past season. All right. 5.5 sacks the year prior. 13 total sacks each of the last 2 seasons, or excuse me, 13 sacks total combined the past 2 seasons. 23 tackles for loss. So this is a guy that the past 2 seasons has shown you, right? Like it wasn't a fluke in 22. I ran it back in 23, and I did it at an even higher level in the Big Ten from a tackles for loss standpoint. 14 tackles for loss this past year to go along with 7.5 sacks. 23 over the last 2 years. So this guy plays on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage. He's a penetrator. He can get into the backfield. He can hold up at the point of attack. He can do everything you want him to do on the football field. He's going to be an excellent addition to this defensive line. And I think this is a fantastic pick. You couldn't have dreamed a scenario any better for the Commanders. If I'm being 110% honest with you, you couldn't have forecasted any better for them. This is exactly what I envisioned when I did my mock draft and I drafted Johnny Newton. This is what I envisioned. An opportunity for you to get a first-round talent in the second round. And I'm so glad we had an organization finally with the foresight to understand when talent and value is falling into your lap and to not bypass it because you've already fixated yourself on a prospect, and no matter what happens, you're taking that guy. That's not how the draft works. You may like a player, but if another guy that is of greater value and more talent slips to you, you scrap that other plan and you go with this new plan of, hey, we got to take this guy. And that's what happened for Washington. To me, it's another A+. This was a fantastic selection. One of my favorites of the draft. Anytime you get a first-round talent in the second round, you just won, period. So you go to the next selection for Washington. Remember, Washington came into day 2 with 2 second-round picks, 3 third-round picks. So they were going to make a total of 5 selections. Now, with that said, Washington had an opportunity to select Cooper DeJean, defensive back out of Iowa. And, I talked about being, giddy if we would have the opportunity to get one of the two, right? Newton or Cooper DeJean. Well, we had a chance to draft both of them. And that would have been a slam dunk too. However, an opportunity presented itself for Washington to move back from 40. And if you recall, I had done a live stream earlier in the day on Friday that suggested that Washington needed to move back in one of 2 situations and scenarios. Either they needed to move back from 40 to acquire another pick, and I was thinking more along the lines of a 4th-round pick, not an additional second, which we'll talk about that in a second, or 78. Move back from 78, and that's exactly what the Eagles did. We traded with the Eagles, and they moved back from 78 to 86, and that's kind of what I was thinking. Either move back from 40, 5, 6, 7, 8 spots. We move back 10 spots, perfect. Or move back from 78, 8, 9 spots, pick up a 4th-round pick. And so they opted with the second-round move back from 40 to 50. Now, what freaked out a lot of people was the team that they decided to move back with, and that was the Philadelphia Eagles. I've always said that the draft makes bedfellows of sworn enemies, which it does. If you've got what I need and there's value for both of us and it makes sense, I'm all about it. I'm on board. Now, here's the only time I'm not okay with trading with a divisional rival. When I'm not giving a family member an opportunity to draft a quarterback that can destroy my ass for the next decade plus. I'm not doing that. Now, had Washington been in a position like the Bears were last year where they had the number 1 overall pick and they didn't need a quarterback this year, let's say Washington this year didn't need Jayden Daniels, didn't need the number 2 pick, and the Giants clearly wanted to get up. They were desperately trying to maneuver their way up the board to get their guy. I'm not trading that pick to the Giants. I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. Now, there were other teams that were interested. I would have done the deal with another team. It wouldn't have been the Giants, even though the Giants would have put you in a position to still get one of the top players in the draft, and you still would have gotten good compensation for the pick. I wouldn't do business with the Giants because I'm not trading you the ability to get yourself a quarterback, which is the most important position in all of the sport, to beat me with for the next decade. I'm just not doing that. It's almost like signing your own death certificate. But what I am going to do is I'm going to trade with you if you're getting a cornerback. I mean, I don't think we just traded away the rights to Darrelle Revis. I don't think any of us feel like that's what we just did in Cooper DeJean. So while he's a good football player, I look at it like this. Mike Sandwichville, who Washington got in this deal with the 50th pick, and then they still have an additional second that they picked up, which is, to me, the kicker and why you can't turn this deal down. He's the best nickel corner in the draft. And I always look at it like this. Do you want the 4th or 5th or 6th best corner? Wherever you had Cooper DeJean on your board of corners, if you look at him as a safety, okay, fine, he's the best safety. Whatever you want to debate him as, knock yourself out. I thought Bucky Brooks had a very unique way and perspective of looking at it. He said, Mike Sandwichville is his best little nickel, right? Small nickel, and then he has big nickel. So he separates the two nickels, right? And Cooper DeJean, I think, might be his number one big nickel. And Mike Sandwichville is his best little nickel. Okay, fine. If that's how you want to do it, knock yourself out. Either way, if it's best on best, it cancels each other out, and we got a second-round pick, another second-round pick that we're going to talk about. So to me, Washington still won the trade. Whether Cooper DeJean is your 4th best corner, well, we got the best nickel corner, and they got the 4th best boundary corner. If he's your best safety, okay, well, we got the best nickel, they got the best safety, it cancels each other out. If he's the best big nickel and we got the best little nickel, it's still best on best. It still cancels out, and we still got an additional second-round pick to boot. So for me, we got the dub in the trade. That's how I view it. Eagles fans are going to love what they got. I love what we got. And so speaking of what we got, Mike Sandwichville, anybody that knows me knows that I love Mike Sandwichville. All right. Mike was one of those dudes that got on my radar last year when I was watching Michigan play against Ohio State in the horseshoe, and he was making some tremendous plays. And they talked about his leadership and how this guy just made the transition from the offensive side to the defensive side. He was already one of the better players on the defensive side of the football. And it was just impressive to me to see this guy who had just made the transition playing the way that he was playing in that type of a game with all that was on the line. Because, again, the winner of that Ohio State-Michigan game usually every year is the team that's going to go and represent the Big Ten on that side of the bracket in the Big Ten championship game. And ultimately, you're playing for the right for a chance to go to the playoffs. The loser of that game isn't going to the playoffs, more likely than not. And to see Mike Sandwichville show up in the manner that he did and make the plays that he was making as a guy that was making his first appearance, on the defensive side of football that year, it blew my mind. And from that point on, I was a big fan of Mike Sandwichville. And watching him develop into what he's turned into, knowing that he's only been playing the defensive side of the football for 2 years, is extraordinary. It's exquisite, knowing what this guy is already and what he ultimately can be, because he's just scratching the surface. When you talk about who he is as a player, Mikey Sandwichville is 5'9", 185. He plays like he's 6'2", 215. All right. He plays physical. He's got an aggressive and violent mindset, right? Kind of fits in that demeanor of what they've talked about. From a football character standpoint, it's off the charts. This guy can blitz. This guy's a sure tackler. This guy is tremendous in coverage. We know the ball skills are there because of his background as a former wide receiver. 6 picks this year, okay? So he checks off every single box, and we know Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. love to blitz their nickel defenders. Well, this guy's an exceptional blitzer as well. So there isn't anything he can't do. And then you look at his personal character, the leadership traits. The first thing I heard about this dude was he was a leader. And normally when I hear it the first 2 times, I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's what everybody says about guys. You want to talk up a guy. You don't want to say anything bad about him. I heard 10 guys all say the same thing. It almost felt like groupthink mentality. It was almost to a T. Everybody to a man said, hey, look, man, when you talk about leaders, when you talk about alphas of the alphas, you're talking about Mike Sainer still. You're talking about a guy here that's a leader of men. When he walks in a room, his presence precedes him. And then he goes out and backs up the things that he says with action. And so he's exactly the type of player you want when you're trying to set the tone, when you're trying to lay the foundation. These are the kind of guys that are of the utmost importance, right? The utmost importance. The play on the field, the upside, the leadership qualities. Best player on the best team on the best defense in college football was Mike Sainer still. Like, there was no doubt that the Michigan Wolverines had the best defense in college football, and he was the best player on the best defense. Mike Sainer still, to me, is another, no doubt about it, absolute steal for the Washington Commanders in this draft. It's an A. All day, every day. Then you go to the next pick. You acquired this in that deal with the Eagles when you move back 10 spots from 40 to 50. You got the 53rd pick. I mean, just getting that pick alone is it's crazy, right? If you're a Commanders fan, these next two picks are, to me, the only two picks in the draft you can debate. Now, when we get to Luke McCaffrey, you could debate that pick for a different reason, but I think when you look at this pick right here of Ben Sinnott, tight end out of K-State, and the pick that came after it, right? People are going to argue that Washington should have taken a tackle at this particular pick. And ultimately, what Brandon Coleman does for this team in this league is going to determine whether or not this was the right decision. And if Ben Sinnott plays really well, but the offensive line struggles, and because of it, Jayden Daniels struggles, people are going to come back to this decision. If Brandon Coleman plays well, this is a non-issue. And it's not a conversation that needs to be brought up again. So it really is going to depend on what happens with the third round pick at 67. But let's talk about this pick at 53. So before we even talk about the player that was had here, that they selected in Ben Sinnott, you got to talk about what was available to Washington. So I talked about the value simply not being there at 36 or 40 at tackle. Like, when you see 8 tackles come off the board in front of you in the first round, like, the hope was that a Tyler Guyton and or a Jordan Morgan would fall to you at 36. That was the hope. You were expecting one of them, maybe not both, but one of them to fall to you. For neither of them to be there, there wasn't any guys that kind of fit in that 36 to 40, 45 range. It all kind of felt like, hey, back into the second, into the third is where the value is at tackle now. And that's what I thought this deal with Philadelphia for Washington was going to constitute, was an opportunity for them to trade back, get into that range where the tackle market is now valuable again, and then get you a tackle. And I thought they were going to do it here at 53. They decided to go with Ben Sinnott. Now, keep in mind, no tackle had been taken in the second round up until this point. So they still had the pick of the litter for the next 3 guys that I thought were in that next conversation of tackles, that next tier, if you will, of Patrick Paul, Kingsley Suamataia, and Blake Fisher. That was the next group, right? That group of 3, right? And then there was the next group after that, and so they were right in that pocket for the next 3. And they could take any of them and they could set the tone there. What this pick says to me is we valued tight end Ben Sinnott more than any of the tackles that were on the board at the time of this selection, right? So they valued Ben Sinnott and thought he was of greater value to them than taking Blake Fisher, Patrick Paul, or Kingsley Suamataia at 53. That's what this pick says. You don't have to guess. They're telling you with their actions. That's why I like when guys are available and you can see what the decision is. If those guys aren't there, then you have to guess. You wonder I wonder what they would have done if that. We don't have to wonder. We don't have to guess. They're telling you Ben Sinnott is of greater value to us than Blake Fisher, Kingsley Suamataia, or Patrick Paul. So for those of you who think, oh, they should have took the tackle here, they're telling you we're good. We think Ben Sinnott is going to help us more and is a better football player overall than those three players. And I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. So now we dig in to Ben Sinnott and talk about him. And I remember when we drafted him, the first thing I said is we just drafted Chris Cooley all over again. And I remember what I used to say growing up, Chris Cooley. That's how I used to call him, right? Sinnott is 6'4", 250. You can line him up anywhere. You can line him up in line as a Y. You can detach him, use him as a U. You can use him as a fullback. You can use him as an H-back. You can use him in a multitude of ways. He can block in line. He can block detached. He can block on the move. He can block as a lead blocker. You can throw it to him anywhere, out of the backfield, up the seam. He can be a reliable underneath route. He's got as strong a set of hands as any tight end in this draft class. And one of the things I think is underrated for him, ran a 4.68, I believe, at the combine, 4.67, 4.68, something to that effect. One of the things I think is underrated with him is his run after catch. No, he's not making anybody miss. He's not juking anybody, but he's jumped over guys before. You know, I see him drag defenders. I see him break tackles all the time. You got to come with the hard hat and the lunch pail if you plan on getting him down. And I think this pick had a lot to do with Adam Peters' experience in San Francisco watching, and he even said as much. And I thought about this in the moment when the pick was made. I said, I bet you, because, you know, I know I was kind of fixated on Ja'Tavion Sanders for Washington because of the athlete. I wanted an athlete. But what I also recognize is that Ja'Tavion Sanders doesn't block. And the rest of the league said the same thing, which is why he didn't go into the fourth round. But, you know, Adam Peters said, I got to see what, you know, a good tight end looks like up close and personal with George Kittle. And even to a lesser degree, Kyle Juszczyk as a fullback. I got to see what that kind of player, those are all pros, by the way. Kyle Juszczyk and George Kittle are all pro players in this league. I got to see that up close and personal and what that looks like. And Ben Sinnott looks like that. He says, I'm not saying he's George Kittle because he's not George Kittle. But what I am saying he is a guy that gives you George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk-like traits. And that gets you excited. I can't speak for you. It gets me excited. So I think it's a great selection because Ben Sinnott comes in and immediately he is going to give you an opportunity here to learn under a veteran like Zach Ertz, right? And give you an opportunity to groom him to be ready to take over as the TE1 next year. And he may even take over as TE1 at some point this year. You know, he won't be number one on the depth chart when the season starts, but by week 8, he might be. Whatever the case may be, you can utilize him in 2 tight end sets. You can utilize him by himself on the field without Zach Ertz. You can put him in the backfield. You can move him around. He's so versatile. And, you know, for so long here in Washington, we've had to choose. You want a guy that can catch or you want a guy that can block. But we never put them in the same body, right? So you either had John Bates, who will block your ass to the moon, but John Bates isn't much of a receiver and a pass catcher. Who are we kidding? I know a lot of you have been standing on the table for John Bates. I've been shitting on John Bates since probably week 6 of his rookie season. Well, okay, no. This isn't what I thought it was. He's basic. You're like, no, Louie T, you're wrong. Nah, he's basic. He's a blocking tight end. He's a TE3, and there's nothing wrong with that. Then you can go to the other end of the spectrum and draft Jordan Reed. And we know what he is and how dynamic he was, but he didn't block worth a damn. And you already knew you couldn't run the ball with him on the field. If you did, you're risking a tackle for loss. And so, where's the middle ground? We haven't been able to find it. Even Vernon Davis, who was a solid block, he wasn't good enough. We haven't been able to find a guy that can catch and block. We have a guy that can do both. And much like I said with Johnny Newton, get you a guy that can do both. Ben Sinnott can do both. Finally, I think we got a guy that can do both. And that is refreshing. So for me, when you couple the Sam Mistrell pick with Ben Sinnott, that trade is a home run. This is a B+ pick here in getting Ben Sinnott at 53 overall. I love this selection, and I think Washington has upgraded their offense. When you think about the weapons now, you add Sinnott to the mix. And we'll talk more about that. Matter of fact, we'll talk about that when we get Luke McCaffrey here in a few picks or in a couple picks. So I talked about being able to argue about whether or not it was the right selection for Washington in the second round at 53 overall with Ben Sinnott, as opposed to going with the tackle. Those three tackles that I just spoke about, Patrick Paul, Blake Fisher, and Kingsley Suamataia, all went off the board in the 14 picks between 53, which is where Washington selected Sinnott, and 67, which is when they would select next with the offensive lineman from TCU, Brandon Coleman. So I think 2 or 3 picks later, Patrick Paul went off the board. Then Blake Fisher went maybe 4 or 5 picks after that. And then right before Washington was to get on the board, the second to last pick, I believe, or the final pick of the second round, one or the other, the Chiefs took Kingsley Suamataia out of BYU. And just like that, all of those options were no longer there. And I'm pretty sure Washington would have taken one of those guys as opposed to Brandon Coleman had one of those guys been there. But we'll never know. We can only assume. But they felt really comfortable with Brandon Coleman. They didn't flinch. They didn't blink. They took another team captain, another guy that they felt like could come in and was exemplary of what they're trying to establish here, which is leaders on and off the field, but also football players with a violent and physical mentality. And with Brandon Coleman, he's a guy that offers you tremendous versatility, but he's going to have a shot to play tackle first and foremost. And when the pick was first made, I'm not going to lie to you, I was a little bit perplexed. I wasn't disappointed because who was left? The only other guy that was, in this mix at that particular pick after watching the other tackles come off the board was Caden Wallace, a guy that Washington didn't have in for a visit, but clearly they spoke. Okay, they had both Caden Wallace and Brandon Coleman in for a visit, and they told you which one they liked better by the selection. They liked Brandon Coleman better. So when I watched him, because he was a guy that Washington had for a visit, so I took a look at him. Anybody that was on the list, I took a look at them. I saw guard. Do you see what the NFL.com has on their website and has Brandon Coleman listed as? Guard. I'm not wrong for thinking he was a guard. But our GM, Adam Peters, clearly, decisively says, no. We drafted a tackle. He's played a lot of tackle. And in order for you to fairly assess, I think, Brandon Coleman and what he's capable of, you need to go back to 2022, which is what I did. Right? I went back and watched him in the playoffs versus both Michigan and Georgia to get a better sense of what this kid is capable of as a tackle. I walked away saying, okay, I feel better about the pick. I feel better about him being a tackle. And we'll see what he ultimately, carves out a niche for himself as in this league, whether it's tackle or guard. I feel good about this. I know this much, and I feel confident saying this. If he's not a competent tackle, he'll be a damn good guard. That's how I feel. You drafted a guy, and this isn't like when we drafted Brandon Sheriff 5th overall, where when you draft a guy 5th, he needs to be a tackle, not a guard. We drafted this guy in the 3rd round. If you get a good guard in the 3rd round, don't you feel good about that? Now, again, I know we need tackle help, and he's going to get an opportunity to play tackle. And I think he can play tackle. How good? We'll find out together. But understand, and I am well aware of this, that this pick right here will go a long way in determining the outcome of how people feel about the Sinnott pick. Because if Coleman plays well at tackle, they're going to love the Sinnott pick just off of face value, off of what he is as a football player. But people won't be able to get past the fact that in drafting Sinnott, you passed up an opportunity, and let Blake Fisher or Patrick Paul or Kingsley Suamataia turn out to be really good and Coleman stinks. Oh, people are really going to be pissed off. That comes with the territory as a general manager. You make these decisions and you make them understanding that this is what it is. This is what the job entails. I'm anxious to see what Brandon Coleman brings to the table. I think he's capable. And so for me, the grade is a solid C because we want to wait and see, right? It's a solid C. I think worst case scenario, you're walking away with a quality guard. That's what I see happening. But I think he can play a tackle. And you know how I feel, and I tell you this all the time. I'm going to give a player every opportunity to prove that he can before I say that he can't. So many people want to just kick guys inside without giving them an opportunity. No, I'm going to give him, he's going to be given an opportunity to play tackle. And we'll see what he does with that. So as you move on to the final pick that Washington had in day number 2, it was the final pick, coincidentally enough, of not only the 3rd round, but day 2 of the draft, 100th overall. The prevailing thought here, after having already taken a corner, a tight end, and a tackle now, an offensive lineman, the thought process was, okay, this either has to be an edge rusher or a wide receiver. It had to be one of the two. Anything else would have been a bit of a surprise, to me at least. I can't speak for you. So Washington selecting Luke McCaffrey, wide receiver out of Rice, was the selection. And I'm going to make sure, I'm going to make this declaration right now. From here on out, I'm not going to call him or reference him as Christian McCaffrey's brother or Ed McCaffrey's son. He's Luke McCaffrey. He's his own man. And I just want to make this abundantly clear. At pick 100, Luke McCaffrey established himself and was selected here based off of his own merit, not his namesake, not because he's McCaffrey's brother or Ed McCaffrey's son. He got here because he's Luke McCaffrey, a damn good football player out of Rice. He had a tremendous Senior Bowl where he got free and was able to showcase his skills against the likes of guys like Quinyon Mitchell, who ultimately will be playing in this division for the Philadelphia Eagles and was a first-round pick. And he also went to the combine and showed well there by running a sub-4, 540, and moving around and catching the ball very well. And so he set himself up to be selected here in the 3rd round off his own merit. So just keep that in mind. But with that said, the only thing that I can say about this pick that if you were going to knock it, you could say, and I'll tell you from my experience, this is what I saw, is that there was one guy that I would have taken over him at this point. And then, you know, some people had other guys that they liked more. And, you know, I like Luke's size. I like what he offers. And we'll talk about that here in a second, over a guy like, say, Malik Washington out of UVA, who didn't go until the 6th round in this draft. He's a good football player, but he's also 5'8", right? We weren't looking for a 5'8" receiver. We were looking for a guy with some size, and I talked about that. And Luke McCaffrey comes in, and immediately he's the biggest receiver on the team at almost 6'2", okay? So they were looking for some size. We were looking for some size, and he offers us a little bit of that, right? So the only guy that I would have taken over him was the receiver from UCF, Javon. Oh man, why am I blanking on his name? Javon, somebody help me out. What's the UCF receiver's name? Javon Baker. That's his name. Javon Baker. I would have taken Javon Baker. That would have been my pick. So that's the only thing that you could say. There was a guy that was here that might have been a little bit better, that could have been an upgrade here. That you're nitpicking at this point, but I'm not tripping about it. I like Luke McCaffrey. I like what he brings to the table. And you got to know, right? Like when this pick was made, I remember my initial reaction was, you can't tell me that there's not a bit of McCaffrey bias in here based off of Adam Peters' relationship with Christian McCaffrey. So he's got a relationship with the McCaffrey family. Okay. My guess is they live out in the Bay Area, right? Because I think they were from there to begin with. And then Christian McCaffrey is playing there now. And he went to Stanford. I think they live out that way. And so I think they already had a relationship. Adam Peters knows their family. And so I'm pretty sure he was exposed to Luke McCaffrey a long time ago. And to see Luke McCaffrey grow up and be what he ultimately turned into, there was an affinity for him. I think that, and you know what? He even said as much. Like, this one was kind of personal for me. And you could see it, right? Makes a little bit of sense. But again, put that aside. This pick was made because Luke McCaffrey is a damn good receiver, not because Luke McCaffrey, is a McCaffrey. So what he brings to the table is at almost 6'2", he's 6'1" and like 3/4, or 6'1" and 7/8. So he's pretty much 6'2", right? He moves like a 5'9" receiver in terms of his quickness, getting in and out of breaks. But he's at 6'2". There's a smoothness to his game that I talked about, a fluidness when he's running routes, runs to open space very well, is tough as nails, right? You see him make some catches where he extends away from his frame, catches the ball, takes a hit, and is able to not only hold on to the ball, but stay on his feet and score the touchdown. So this is a guy that obviously ran the 4.46 or so at the combine. And so he offers you speed. He offers you toughness, really good hands, good route runner. There's a luxury and a comfort that comes with Luke McCaffrey that you just feel good about. And so when I talked about him, I said he's a great value, a poor man's Ricky Pearsall. And that's exactly what I think he is. Ricky Pearsall is 6'1". Luke McCaffrey's a shade under 6'2". Ricky Pearsall ran a 4.41. Luke McCaffrey ran about a 4.46 or so. Luke McCaffrey can work inside. Luke McCaffrey can work outside. Ricky Pearsall can work inside. Ricky Pearsall can work outside. Ricky Pearsall is tough at the point of catch, as we saw against Charlotte, where he made the one-hand grab, got lit up, and held on to it. Luke McCaffrey can do the same thing. Make tough catches in traffic, take a shot, hold on to the ball. Where the biggest difference is with the ball in his hands, Ricky Pearsall is a physical guy, whereas Luke McCaffrey isn't as physical. He's physical at the point of catch. He's not running anybody over. He's not breaking through a lot of tackles with the ball in his hands, but he brings a lot to the table that you have to like. And now when you look at the skill positions that you've surrounded your young quarterback, Jayden Daniels, with, and you think about in totality what this team has to offer, you've set Jayden Daniels up for success. Think about it from this standpoint. At receiver, you now have Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson with Luke McCaffrey to go along with those two guys, right? And still have a De'Ami Brown, a Jamison Crowder, Mitchell Tinsley, or whomever you like as one of those guys towards the back end of the receiver room, right? You look at tight end, you added Ben Sinnott along, to go along with Zach Ertz. And, we'll see what they make of the rest of that tight end room, if Cole Turner emerges finally, or if they get anything out of, one of the other tight ends. But you got a really good room. You feel good about those top two tight ends in particular, right? Then you look at the running back position. You got, B-Rob, Brian Robinson, and you got Austin Eckler. That's a hell of a 1-2 punch there. So you surrounded him with talent now, right? You go 3 deep, 4 deep at receiver. You go 2 deep at tight end, maybe 3. Depending on what you get out of some of these other guys that are going to compete on the roster. And then you go too deep at running back, and you feel good about that tandem that you're going to be able to put on the field. So, this Luke McCaffrey pick for me is a rock solid B, man. He comes in, and right away, I think he's going to be able to contribute on this team and really help a young quarterback with a reliable target underneath. We've talked about guys like Pierre Garçon, who are dogs, who are physical, who are going to make those contested catches. Terry McLaurin is one of those type of guys. So is Luke McCaffrey. So now you get into day 3 for Washington, and they had 3 selections, 2 in the 5th, 1 in the 7th. And we had no 4th round pick, which sucked, but that's the nature of the beast. When you have 5 selections in day 2, including 3 seconds and 2/3, are we really complaining about not having a 4th? I think the answer is no, right? So Washington in the 5th round select Jordan McGee, linebacker out of Temple. And I mocked Washington Jordan McGee in my mock draft. And part of the reason that I did this is because Washington gave me a specific set of ingredients, right? Things that they were looking for in a player. And once you give me the shopping list, I'll go out and I'll find you the items that you told me you were looking for, right? I'll find you a product. You give me the ingredients, I'll find you the product, okay? And so they gave me the ingredients. We're looking for athletes because we want to play fast. We're looking for physical guys because we want to play violent. We're looking for dogs. We want aggressive mentality, okay? Because we're trying to be a team that takes the football away. We want guys that can get after the quarterback, okay? Because we want to disrupt things. We don't want quarterbacks back there patting the ball and burping the baby back there. No, we want him to get rid of that bitch faster than he wants to. So when you tell me that you're looking for all of these things, Jordan McGee ran a 4.55. Jordan McGee blew up the combine from an athletic standpoint. Blew it up, okay? When you tell me you're looking for a guy that's aggressive and violent, showing up with violent intentions, guy that has the ability to close the distance from a speed standpoint, closing ability, very, very quick to close when there's a gap in an avenue there for him to be able to exploit. When you talk about a guy that's capable of blitzing, 3.5 sacks this year, 4.5 the previous year, 8 sacks over the last 2 seasons combined. When you talk about a guy with 14 tackles for loss, this is a guy that's disruptive, right? Making plays. You're talking about Jordan McGee, right? A guy that can run with tight ends down the field, a guy that can be a coverage linebacker as well. You're talking about Jordan McGee. So when you put all those things together, he wasn't in for a visit with Washington. You just gave me the list of ingredients, and I said, okay, I'll go and I'll find you who you're looking for. I came back with Jordan McGee. They agreed. So he really got on my radar. When I was watching the combine, and I told this story already, I'll tell it again, though. He was about to run his 40, and the lead draft analyst for NFL Network, a guy that I trust wholeheartedly, and when he speaks, I listen. Daniel Jeremiah said, I went around the league for support on Jordan McGee. I like this kid. And I went around the league looking for support of Jordan McGee. And he said, I couldn't find it. I couldn't get people to back me up. He was looking for somebody to say, hey, DJ, I like this kid too. I see what you see. I think this kid's got a chance to be really good in the league. He wasn't getting that feedback. And he said, I was a little disappointed because I really like this kid. He said, I think his exact words was, he's got some snap to him, right? He's a little ornery. He's got some snap to him. When you watch him, he triggers downhill very quickly. He gets in the backfield. He can get after the quarterback. He's a blitzing type of linebacker too. He does a lot of things that I think translate well to the NFL. And I heard blitz, and I told you my ears perked up. Doop, 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 doop. And he said, I like this kid, and I'm sticking to my assessment of him. And so that's the DJ stamp of approval. Boop. I said, okay, I'll take a look at this kid. And so when I went to do my Washington mock draft, I saw everything DJ saw. And I thought about Dan Quinn's defense and what they want to do. And I said, this kid fits. This is why I made the pick. There's nothing else to be said. Clearly, they felt the same way that I did, right? They said, hey, Louie T, job well done. We'll take it from here. They make the selection. Now, you know, I had a few debates. We'll call them a few debates with people prior to the draft about the linebacker position in general. And it wasn't a strong linebacker draft class. But I said there were 3 linebackers, similar to offensive tackle, quarterback. And there were a lot of positions that were like that. I thought corner was like that too, where there was like 3 or 4 guys that were lumped together that were at the top of the class of that position. And then there was clear separation. With linebacker, for me, it was 3 linebackers. They were all packaged together, and then the rest of the linebackers were sold separately, okay? People wanted to argue with me that a 4th linebacker was in that mix in Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and I was like, no. There are 3 linebackers that are sold together in this draft, okay, that have value, okay? Peyton Wilson, Junior Colson, and Edgerrin Cooper. Those are the 3 that are packaged together. Every other linebacker is sold separately. Okay. All 3 of those guys went in day 2. And then Washington had a choice to take Jordan McGee or Jeremiah Trotter Jr. because Trotter was still available in the 5th round. A lot of linebackers came off the board before him, which the league spoke again, loud and clear. Now, I'm not telling you that Jeremiah Trotter Jr. won't be a good linebacker. I'm just telling you the league spoke as to where they felt like he belonged. And Washington spoke too, because they had a chance to take him and they chose Jordan McGee. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. went to the Eagles, 4 or 5 picks after this selection was made? So it just goes to tell you, Washington said, we see the guy that fits what we want to do. He fits our DNA profile. I love it. Well, what's not to love here, right? So with that said, this is another guy that I think just fits. You know, another guy that was a team captain, another guy that comes in with that mentality of arriving violently. And this is another B for me, man. Like, you get this kind of player. He doesn't have to come in and play right away. He's going to come in here. He's going to contribute on special teams. But he's going to, you know, what kind of invaluable experience you get from being in a room with Bobby Wagner for a season? You understand what that could do for you in your career moving forward? Just sitting in there, taking notes, watching him, how he goes about his business, how he trains, you know, how he prepares, how he takes notes. Do you know what that could do for a guy like Jordan McGee? That's a B for me. Now we get to the next 5th round pick. So in my mock draft, I also selected Dominic Hampton for the team. Again, when you give me a list of ingredients and you say, hey, go find me a player, I'm like a search engine. Just input the information you need. I'll bring you back the results. Okay. So they gave me everything. And I took studious notes when they told me what they were looking for. And so I said, okay, I'll go find you a safety. You need a safety? I'll go find you a safety. And I drafted Dominic Hampton in this exact spot. Now, Washington, in that trade with Philadelphia, moved back 8 spots. This initially was the 153rd pick in the draft. And that's why I had taken him in my mock draft. So I had the right round. I had the right pick, right area where he would come off the board. They moved back 8 spots and they still get Dominic Hampton, safety out of Washington. And I love this pick. Love it. Because not only does he check every box that we've talked about, leader, right? This guy was at Washington for 6 years. 6 years this man played college football. Okay. So when we talk about leadership qualities, he's a grown-ass man coming into the league. Like, seriously, he's a grown man. Okay. He's been in college football for 6 years. He's a captain. He's got the demeanor. He's physical as all get out. So he's got that mindset of arriving violently. He's athletically as gifted as any player on this list. He blew up the combine. Okay. Now, he ran even faster at his pro day reportedly than the 4.5 140. But this guy jumped 40 inches. This guy had a broad of almost 11 feet. You know, this guy was ridiculous at the combine from an athletic standpoint. You look at his traits and his measurables, and what's not to like? 6'2", 215, rocked up, physical mentality, will come down and hit you, can play underneath coverage, can run with tight ends with that speed and length, obviously. And the thing that I love the most is I looked at him and I said, he's a doppelganger. He's a clone of a guy that I said, and again, they gave me the shopping list, right, in free agency. And I said, okay, this is what you're looking for? Go to the Carolina Panthers store. They got some items for us. I told everybody before free agency, Frankie Louie and Jeremy Chin are two guys that if you're talking about what Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. are looking for, the shopping list, the items, these are two guys that they should go get. What did they do? They went and got Frankie Louie. They went and got Joe Witt Jr. They went and got Jeremy Chin. Dominique Hampton is Jeremy Chin, right? Jeremy Chin is 6'2", 6'3", 215, 220, ran a 4.45 at the combine, rocked up, physical, better down around the line of scrimmage as a big linebacker as opposed to a safety away from the line of scrimmage. And he can play underneath coverage. He can run with tight ends. But his job, his best trait and attribute, speaking of Jeremy Chin, is arriving violently, coming down and being physical. I just described to you Dominique Hampton. Just change the name, right? Just change the name on the back of the jersey. Instead of it saying Chin, it just says Hampton. So what you've effectively done is you've put yourself in a position that if Jeremy Chin, and I think if he's healthy this year, and that's another thing that you got to keep your eye on is he able to stay healthy? Because that's been a part of, his downfall here of late is the inability to stay healthy. But if Jeremy Chin is healthy, I see a massive season on the horizon for him. I see him absolutely crushing it in this Joe Witt Jr., Dan Quinn defensive scheme, murdering it to the point where he signed a 1-year deal. He's very young, right? Probably 24, 25 years old. He's in line for a nice payday if he plays well this year. Do you want to invest? I wouldn't be opposed to it. I wouldn't be opposed to investing in him. I don't think it's going to cost you a whole hell of a lot to bring him back, but you just never know what that number looks like, right? And if that number is a little bit greater than what they're willing to pay, guess what you already have on the roster? Guess. I give you one guess. You don't need a lot. You got his replacement, the guy that looks just like him, plays just like him, right? And now Dominique Hampton's in your system, so he's already learned it. So he can step in seamlessly next year. Hell, like I said, if something were to happen this year where Chin's got to be out for whatever reason for 2 to 4 weeks, Hampton can step in this year and give you some quality snaps. So I just love this pick from all angles. Leader, football character, right? Personal character, athletic profile, size. And this is the thing. He's going to be a core special teamer right out of the packaging. As soon as you open up the Dominique Hampton package, you're like, damn, let me see what I got. And you pop the top on it. He comes out of the box like, hey, man, you need me down on special teams? Yeah, I do, actually. And he's going to be one of the best special teamers on the team. Right out of the gate, right? Right out of the box. And then he's going to transition into being a contributor on defense. And you know the role that you have carved out for him already. And you're going to get to see it with Jeremy Chin. So when you put all of those things together, for me, at this point of the draft, having a vision for a guy and going out and getting a guy with the athletic profile that you're getting in Dominique Hampton, this is an A for me. It's an A pick right here. Love it here in the 5th round. And then you get to Washington's final pick in this draft. And it's edge rusher Javonte Jean-Baptiste out of Notre Dame. This is a guy 6'5", about 238, 239. So he's clearly undersized. So this is your traditional draft and stash type of selection. This is what you call a developmental prospect in every sense of the word. They have guys when Adam Peters talked about having a runway for guys where they don't have to necessarily contribute. They have a chance to come in, learn, get stronger, develop. He's talking about guys like Javonte Jean-Baptiste is who he's speaking of. You signed 4 edge rushers in free agency. Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler Jr., Cleveland Farrell, F.A. Obata. right? You already had Andre Jones Jr. and KJ Henry here from last year. You also had the defensive end from Chicago that you took off their practice squad here. So there's a bevy of guys here probably vying for 4 spots. Well, you just signed 4 guys in free agency. So the likelihood is Javonte John Baptiste isn't making your team. But what you are willing to do is stash him away on the practice squad, let him develop. You're hoping that he bulks up to 247, 250 over this year. And then you're hoping that he's able to develop in a room where he'll be around the likes of Armstrong, as I mentioned, and Dante Fowler Jr. and Cleveland Farrell, and he'll see how to work, how to take notes, similar to what I talked about with Jordan McGee and being around a future Hall of Famer in Bobby Wagner. And so he has things that you can't teach, does Javonte John Baptiste. You're talking about a guy that's 6'5" with 34-inch arms, essentially. His arms are like 33 and like 5/8 or some shit like that. It's the ridiculous length for an edge rusher, right? So that's something that's captivating right there. He's really athletic, ran a 4.6 something, if I'm not mistaken, right? At his size, at the position that he plays, and that's exceptional with a good 10-second split, right? So he shows the explosive qualities. On tape, you watched him. He spent 4 years at Ohio State before transferring to Notre Dame for his final year of college ball. And he had his best season of his career at Notre Dame. So, he's ascending. He's an ascending player, 5 sacks this year. My favorite Javonte John Baptiste play as a Notre Dame fan wasn't him getting to the quarterback or stopping a run. It was him picking up a blocked punt or a blocked field goal, rather, against Stanford and running for a touchdown. He stiff-armed the kicker and scored the touchdown. And he was so excited, man. I was excited for him. Anytime you score like that, it's a pretty big deal in a blowout win. And we were destroying Stanford at the time. And anytime beat up on Stanford, it's good if you're Notre Dame because, you never know. They beat us the year before when they sucked ass and we were trying to make it back into, a New Year's Six bowl game and we lost at home to Stanford. So that one felt really good last year when we stomped a mud hole in them. But anyway, I digress. This is a guy that, to me, has some slipperiness, can knife into the backfield, can get away from blockers, but he's not strong enough at the point of attack yet. And he doesn't have a bevy of moves. And while he can bull rush at times, he doesn't have a rush plan, and he has no idea what he's doing right now as an edge rusher. He's just kind of trying to beat you with raw athleticism. And he's going to have to develop a plan. And this is what this period is for, right? For him to learn how to be a pass rusher, learn some technique. He has no technique whatsoever right now. He's just a raw athlete that you draft and you develop. So with that in mind, you finish this draft off with a C here in the 7th round. And so when you put all of this together and you total it up, you get a 30... a 30.5, I believe. You divide 30.5 by 9, which is the 9 selections, and you come away with a 3.38. And a 3.38 equals out to a B+ draft for the Washington Commanders. It's a stellar draft. It's an outstanding draft. It's a draft that we should all be proud of. And I think this is a foundational type of draft, one that sets the tone and the culture moving forward for this organization. It's the kind of draft that, especially if you hit on Jayden Daniels, you're going to look back on this draft and say, this was the turning point. When we added Johnny Newton and Ben Sinnott and Mike Sainristil and, Brandon Coleman and Dominique Hampton and Luke McCaffrey and Jordan McGee to the likes of Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, when we added those guys to the mix of a Brian Robinson Jr., that's what helped change fundamentally who we were as a football team and made us into the bully that we've ultimately become. This will be the draft that you look back on. If this draft does what we think they're capable of doing, this will be the draft right here. This will be the one. So let's get to the comment section real quick and see what you guys have to say. Barrett Downing, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Barrett Downing, writes, BR show was tight, but you need your own show. I'll support it 100%. Respect. I mean, I do have my own show. It's right here. It's right here on YouTube, right? Unless you talk about my own show on Bleacher Report. Yeah, I mean, it sucked that the audio wasn't working. I didn't like that. You know, that's not a good representation of the product that I'm looking to put out. But like I said, I'm about to upgrade my mic, and I'm excited about that. I'm in the process of going through what's going to be the best mic, and that'll be one of the off-season changes that you'll see here as we head into the off-season. Now that the draft is behind us and in the rearview mirror, things are going to slow down, obviously, and so I'll have an opportunity to kind of get that set up and play around with it and figure out how it works and make that transition, because as you know, I have a strong voice, and sometimes my OG here doesn't necessarily do a great job of handling my voice. So I appreciate you supporting BD, man, as always. Excuse me. Dr. B, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Dr. B writes, Lou, my guy, what a great draft. We're on our way up. Feels good, doesn't it? Yeah, I think this was a tremendous draft, and I do think we're on the way up. We're on the rise. Keep rising to the top. We on the way. Give it all you got. I think we are definitely on our way up. We rising. And we'll see how quickly we rise. But here's the biggest thing, man. The thing that I'm most excited about from the start of this offseason, getting Adam Peters, getting Lance Newmark, getting Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr. and adding the coaches to the staff that they've added, and adding all the players in free agency, and now adding all these players in the draft. The thing I'm most excited about is just knowing that what we're doing is sustainable. This isn't a flash in the pan. This isn't, oh man, we caught lightning in a bottle and snuck into the back door of the playoffs. What we're doing is we're building a consistent winner. And I know with every fiber of my being, I know we're going to be competitive this year, because the shit we watched last year was uncompetitive and not a lot of fun. Most weeks we showed up knowing that there's a very good chance we're going to get our brains bashed in today. And we just got to sit here and take it for 3 hours. We're going to be competitive, if nothing else. We might not win the game, but we'll be right there. We'll be right there. And that, my friends, is why you should feel really good about what's been done. 28, the great, no debate. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. 28, the great, no debate writes, Lou, in the AM, say less. What's good, my guy? Nothing much, man. You must be on the left coast or somewhere in the Midwest. When I started this stream, it was still AM for you. So what up, man? Get you some Louie tea with your breakfast, man. Glad I could provide a little bit of something for you early on in the morning. He says, I like our draft. They had a plan. I don't know if they got their number one guys, but they stuck to their guns. A+. I love it. I love the fact that they definitely stuck to their guns. They stuck to what they told us. They stuck to what they have been preaching, which is we're going to get the best football players that we possibly can get. The guys that we value, the guys, they said that players have a commander's tag, right? That they put on them, a commander's label, if you will. And I listened to Lance Newmark, who did the press conference for day 3 of the draft. And he talked about all the guys and why they fit here. And, Peters had done the same the previous 2 days. And, they talk about this commander's tag that they have, this label that they put on players. We haven't had that here ever, right? Maybe you got to go all the way back to Gibbs 1.0 with Beathard when he was finding guys that kind of fit what Washington wanted to do. But since Gibbs 1.0, we haven't had, Redskins or football team or Commanders guys. Now we do. There's a thing, right? There's a certain je ne sais quoi. There are redeeming qualities that must exist for you to fit. Because as I mentioned to you before, and I'm going to continue to use this because I like this, Washington isn't going to be for everybody. Remember Joe Witt Jr. when he first got here, he said, hey, look, this defense ain't going to be for everybody. We not for everybody. How we do things, how we demand things of you, we not for everybody. And look, if we not for you, that's cool. We not mad. We not upset. We just need you to know what the standard is here and what we looking for. And if you don't fit that, there's the door over there. Like, no animosity on our end. We good. But we're going to find guys that fit exactly what it is we're trying to accomplish and what it looks like. They stuck to their guns and they got guys that fit what a commander is supposed to look like. That is refreshing. It really, truly is. Coach T. Brown, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Coach T. Brown writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Coach? Hope all is well. Likewise. After looking at the whole draft, I believe this is a great one. There are a few that have position flexibility that can help in places the fans think they missed. The May stands left the team, LOL. They haven't left. They're just quiet right now. And I'm hoping they stay quiet by the performance of Jayden Daniels. They're quiet right now because what are you going to say? I mean, they made their decision. It is what it is. Now you gotta accept it for what it is. And until they start playing games, they're going to be quiet because there's nothing you can say right now. If Jayden Daniels struggles or Drake May looks good in the preseason, those Drake May stands are going to rise from the ashes. Okay, they're going to awaken and they're going to be loud. And only thing that's going to keep them quiet or quiet them down if they try to get loud in the preseason is Jayden Daniels playing well in the regular season. So we'll see what happens. But to your point, that this draft is really good, and you're not going to fix every single need or you're not going to plug every single hole. They did the best that they could, and I think they did the best with the resources that they were provided. But you're not going to clean everything up in 1 year. They know that. We know that. And so there may still be one or two things we go through the season saying, hey, we got to get this next year. And it might be tackle again. And they'll be in a better position next year to aggressively attack tackle than they were this year, where you had to get the quarterback. So we'll see what happens. Mr. HTTR, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Or excuse me. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, not doubling up. He writes, what's up, Lou? What's up, Mr. HTTR? Sipping on my yak this fine Sunday afternoon. Look at you getting the party started. I'm gonna drink a little bit of my water over here, man. I'm not in the adult beverage territory yet. Probably get to a little bit of that later. Says, now that the draft is over, I feel we'll see a couple more free agent signings. I've been eyeing Justin Simmons and Ayuk since free agency started. What says you for additions? I don't know if there are going to be any more additions. Justin Simmons definitely not coming here. They don't need him. 2, it doesn't make sense. And 3, I think he goes to a team that's contending for something, a team that may have missed out on safety in the draft. And he's going to cost a little bit of money. He's not going to come cheap, right? And not that we can't afford him, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense. He probably wants to go to a contending team. I would if I were him. And that's not where we are in our process. As far as Ayuk is concerned, he's interesting. I don't see Washington doing anything there. If they were going to do something there, I think you could have seen them bypass receiver altogether in the draft. Being that they went receiver, I think it's pretty safe to say that they're out of the receiver market at this current juncture. They re-signed Jamison Crowder. They signed Olamide Zaccheaus. You still have Mitchell Tinsley and other guys vying for spots on this roster. They got Rosemy St. Jack from Georgia as a UDFA, which I think is a fantastic UDFA to bring in here and to compete. So I just think that it's highly unlikely that they look to add Brandon Ayuk, but they'll be scouring the free agent markets to see if anything shakes free post-draft and to see if anybody is an upgrade over what they currently have. I think they'll be very mindful and vigilant of that, but I don't see them being super aggressive post-draft in free agency. That second wave, if you will. Fat American, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Fat American writes, 05 draft greater than this draft. I mean, I don't even remember who was in the 05 draft, to be honest with you. Was 05, 04 was Cooley and Sean Taylor was 04. So I don't even know what the 05 draft looked like. Whatever it was, I doubt it was better than this draft. I think you just love 05 in general. So everything's better in 05. If you could go back to 05, you would. If you can go in a time machine, you would. But anyway, I digress. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this Sunday afternoon, morning, depending on where you guys are. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. And we'll be back tomorrow, more likely than not, talking draft. Enjoy the rest of your day. Kind of just bask in everything, as I mentioned, kind of take it all in. And I've put out plenty of content for you to enjoy over the last 4 days or so. So go ahead, consume that, and we'll get back to it on Monday. And I think Monday will be more of a podcast, type of environment where I want to go over the draft and where guys ended up, look at everybody's draft, talk about who were the draft winners, and looking at some of the players, where they ended up. Is it a good fit? XYZ. So it's going to be a massive draft show probably tomorrow night, if I had to guess. But in any event, Fat American, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling it up. Who writes, pull up the 05 draft, Lou. Let's compare. I saw in the comment section, people brought up Carlos Rogers and Jason Campbell. I remember that was the draft where we traded back up, and that was the Aaron Rodgers draft. We traded back up, and we took Jason Campbell. I don't think that draft was all that great, to be honest with you. But I'll look it up real quick. 2005 Redskins draft. And the draft looks like this. Let's see. The draft was Carlos Rogers, Jason Campbell, Manuel White, Robert McCune, Jared Newberry, and Nehemiah Broughton. You can't be serious. Like I almost, if you were in front of me, I might hit you with a bionic elbow in the top of your skull for making me go look that shit up. That draft was trash. Rockman 1033. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, is it a chance we trade for a left tackle before the season starts? I wouldn't omit anything, or I wouldn't disregard any scenarios playing themselves out. I don't think so. I don't see us trading for anybody. I don't see us giving up future draft capital or giving up a player to get a tackle in here. I think they really feel good about Brandon Coleman. They feel good about the tackles that are already on the roster, and they feel good about the mix of offensive linemen that we have. And they're going to coach these guys up, and they're going to try to put the best 5 on the field. And I don't think they're going to do anything else. I don't, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Fat American, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, Vinny Serrato, greater than AP, good old days. Fat American, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Fat American writes, I'm kidding, by the way, Lou. Of course you're kidding. I was kidding too. You think I would really hit you with a bionic elbow in the top of your skull? Come on, man. I knew you were kidding. He says, I'm excited, bro. Finally have some competent people running the front office. Yes, I agree. So look, man, if you weren't excited, you wouldn't be here. You trust me, you wouldn't be here. I know how you operate. You were disappointed. You'd probably wait until camp got here when the juices start to get flowing and you're like, all right, man, even though I'm not happy about what's going on, I'm here because it's football time. You're here because you're excited and you're not alone, Anyway, I digress. Damon Bullock, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Damon, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. So, you guys enjoy. This is a lovely day today, weather-wise. If you're on the East Coast, specifically in the DMV area, get outside, get you some sunlight. You've been trapped inside following this draft the last 3 days, and go get you some fresh air and enjoy all that the great outdoors has to offer. And we'll come back tomorrow night and dive deep into the draft, looking at everybody's draft. And really talk about what transpired and where some of these guys ended up that we've been talking about a ton this draft process and kind of see what everybody was able to accomplish, not just the Commanders. So in any event, you guys have a good one. Take care. God bless. Good day.